Hello, Psych 101 students. Welcome to Module 6, Chapter 13, Learning Objective 9. We will look at the biological basis of personality and the influence of genes. There will just be 2 slides in this video, but there will be a fair bit added to each, so make sure you take notes. Okay, so in the previous video, we went over personality trait theory formulated by Eysenck. He stated that there were 3 dimensions of personality, each with a biological basis. One of his dimensions was extroversion, introversion. Eysenck proposed that there was a relationship between the reticular activating system and the activity there and the introversion extroversion dimension. The reticular activating system is involved in maintaining arousal and alertness, keeping us awake, and the stages of sleep. People who are extroverted tend to have an underactive reticular activating system and therefore lower levels of arousal. So they have an underactive system that keeps that tends to provide them with a lower level of arousal. To function optimally, they tend to seek out exciting activities. So if you look at this picture, the extroverts, kind of operate at a lower level of arousal, and this is why they seek more outgoing activities in order to reach their optimal level of arousal. By contrast, people who are introverted have an overactive reticular activating system and therefore higher levels of arousal. So to function optimally, they tend to seek out calming activities. So the introverts start out at a higher level, and so they look for more relaxing activities. Meaning, like, if you're introverted, and it's kind of like you're already operating at a higher level of arousal. So you could read a book and still, reach your optimal level of arousal because you're already at a high level. So you're looking for something calm that will bring you to the level of arousal that is best for you. Okay, so how your reticular activating system helps determine if you are more extroverted or introverted. So we see a biological connection here. The biology of your RAS, the reticular activating system, can help determine whether you end up being more extroverted or introverted. Behavioral genetics research tries to disentangle the effects of nature and nurture. That is, genetic factors versus environmental factors. They use twin and adoption studies to do this. In a twin study, they compare identical and fraternal twins. I'm going to zoom in on this picture here. Okay. So identical twins have the same genes, they're the same sex, and they look the same. Fraternal twins have no more genes in common than any 2 siblings who are not identical twins. So they can be boy and girl, and certainly not look alike. Researchers examined the similarity between personality traits for 123 pairs of identical twins and 128 pairs of fraternal twins. Their findings showed that identical twins are more similar in personality traits than our fraternal twins. And you can see this in the graph here. These are, the correlations between the identical twins on each of the big 5 personality traits, colored in green. And you can see that the correlation levels, which is, the similarity levels between them, is much higher compared to the similarity levels between the fraternal twins. Remember, the identical twins have 100% of their genes in common. They both have the same genetics, whereas the fraternal twins, on average, only have about 50% of their genes in common. This means that personality traits must be influenced by genetics. There's no reason that the identical twins would be so much more similar on each of the 5 personality traits if genetics wasn't a factor. But all of the correlations that you see in this graph here are certainly well below the 1 correlation level, 1.0 correlation level, which means that the identical twins are not exactly alike, which is what you would expect if only genes were responsible for personality traits. All these green bars should be up at 1.0 if genes were the sole determiner of personality. But you can see that they're all way less than 1.0. I mean, these are still fairly high correlations, but they're well below the exact match. So identical twins certainly are different in their personality characteristics, even though they have the exact same genes. So personality must also be influenced by environmental factors. Okay. Further evidence for the genetic basis of personality comes from adoption studies. They have found that adopted children are more similar to their biological parents than to their adopted parents. So the biological parents gave birth to them, but the adoptive parents, in many cases, have raised them since they were babies. But they end up being more similar to the biological parents who they shared genes with, but who did nothing to raise them. So this is more evidence that personality is influenced by genes. In fact, 2 children who are not biologically related but are raised in the same household are no more alike than 2 strangers randomly picked off the street. So in an adopted household, 2 of the children that have no blood relation, no genetics in common, even though they're being raised in the same household by the same adopted parents, they're no more similar in personality than 2 random people. Okay. These findings suggest that parenting style has less impact on personality than previously assumed. Because obviously they would be somewhat similar if parenting style really made a difference to personality. But the evidence seems to suggest that what we do as parents is not really affecting personality. I mean, we do know that there are environmental influences, but it seems that parenting is not one of the big ones. And so genetics seem to kind of rule the day here a little bit with some environmental influence on personality. But once again, children don't become similar just because they're raised by the same parents. And that will conclude, actually, learning objective 9.